All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Provo Municipal Council to order. The time is 5:32 p.m. on Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. This meeting will be conducted entirely via electronic means on February 25th, 2021. In accordance with Utah's Open and Public Meetings Act, I have determined that conducting meetings in the Municipal Council with an anchor location, such as the Municipal Council Chamber, presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present there. These are the facts upon which I've made this determination. The World Health Organization has classified novel coronavirus, aka COVID-19, as a pandemic. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention state that COVID-19 is easily spread from person to person between people who are in close contact with one another. State Public Health Order 2021-5 addresses the ongoing COVID-19 public health emergency and establishes minimum standards to address the unique circumstances in different locations. Utah County is currently listed as having a high level of coronavirus transmission as determined by the state's transmission index metrics. Physical distancing measures will be difficult to set up and maintain in the Provo City Municipal Council chamber and other meeting rooms. Additionally, the chair of the governing board of the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City, Shannon Ellsworth, has determined that its meetings are subject to the same risks and has adopted the same procedures as the Municipal Council. The meeting will be available to the public for live broadcast and on-demand viewing at youtube.com/Provo City Council. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices and being respectful to others. Please wait to speak until called upon by the council chair. In the current situation where the meeting is being held via Zoom webinar and broadcast over YouTube, I remind you to turn off your mics when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. I'll now state the role of the names of council members who are here. Looking at my screen, I see Councilor Shannon Ellsworth, David Harding, and okay, I'll have to scroll through here. Travis Hoban, Dave Shipley, George Handley, Bill Fillmore, Dave Sewell, myself am here, and Mayor Kafusi is with us as well as other members of the administration and council staff. The opening prayer tonight will be offered by Mr. Hoban.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful to be here today as a council and an administration. We're grateful for the opportunity we have to serve this wonderful city and the people of this city. We ask that we'll be guided tonight to ask the right questions and make good decisions. We are grateful for the progress that's being made with the pandemic and the vaccine, and we ask that our great city can be watched over and the people of the city can be watched over. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that prayer, Mr. Hoban. I appreciate that we can start our meetings that way. The Pledge of Allegiance will be provided by me, Mr. Sewell. You'll repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now move to the public comment portion of our meeting. We're now ready to receive public comment. Staff will play a short video explaining how interested persons can comment.
Slight technical difficulty. Hold on a second.
Okay.
It's inevitable, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It worked in practice earlier today, by the way.
I know. Everything works in practice. Oh, goodness. Let me open it again. Maybe it just got tired of waiting.
There are 3 types of items for which public comment will be received. Comment period. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for public comments on matters that do not appear on tonight's agenda. The second is for items that require a public hearing. For these items, time will be provided for all those who wish to speak. The third is for items on the agenda that do not require a public hearing. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for comments on each item. Because the City Council is meeting virtually using Zoom webinar, and this meeting is being broadcast on the Provo City Council's YouTube channel, we have enabled telephone access to receive public comment, the numbers for which will be shown on screen during the meeting. When a caller is connected, they will be required to enter the meeting ID and enter the pound symbol. When asked for a personal ID number, enter pound. The caller will now enter the meeting as an attendee and will be able to hear the meeting while muted. Similarly, we have enabled access for persons wanting to connect via computer to the Zoom meeting. As attendees, you can raise your hand electronically at the appropriate times to comment when called upon. For telephone callers, when you wish to speak on the item being discussed, press *9 to raise your hand and then wait to be called upon. When called upon, press *6 to unmute yourself. Attendees will be called upon by the last 4 digits of the listed phone number or by the name listed. Please provide your name and city of residence before making your comments. You will be given up to 2 minutes to speak. A timer will be posted on screen and a beep should be audible when your time is up. A reminder that there is a lag of approximately 30 to 60 seconds between the meeting and the broadcast. To avoid confusion, callers should mute the broadcast to hear the discussion in real time. The open public comment period starts now.
While we're waiting,
Nice work.
yeah, thank you, Councilor Hoven. That's what I was going to say. Wanted to thank council staff and Brett Borgen and Channel 17 for their help in putting that together.
So if any of the attendees who are on wish to speak during this open public comment, please select raise hand and we will call on you. We'll give it a few seconds, and if we don't see a hand go up, we'll assume you're here for another item. I believe all that are on there are waiting for another item, Mr. Chair.
All right, then we will close public comment and move on to action agenda item number 1, which is an implied motion on a resolution regarding the sales tax increment post-performance payment with Eastbay Shopping Center LLC. If any members of the public would like to comment for this item, you're encouraged to call in or sign in now so that you'll be ready. Calling and Zoom audio instructions can be found on agendas.provo.org or on the council blog and the current YouTube stream of this meeting. This item is to be presented by Dixon Holmes, our Assistant Chief Administrative Officer.
Council Chair and council members, again, the city has 3 current sales tax increment deals, one in East Bay, Days Market up in Northeast Provo, and then on the University Parkway, there where the Walmart is. This one is the second of a payment, or second deal that we're making a payment. This is the first payment to the Eastbay Shopping Center. This was a part of the deal for bringing in the Ross post-performance. And again, this is a request of the dollar amount over the base. And so this does require a council appropriation because these requests or these sales tax agreements are post-performance. There is no scheduled line item in the budget to appropriate the funding on this. So every year when we calculate the increase over the base, it's a request coming forward to the council. And so we make that request this evening. This went to study session 2 weeks ago. And if the council or general public has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Holmes? And Mr. Holmes, would it be fair to say that this appropriation is basically just following through on a commitment that we've already made?
That is correct. This agreement was, again, crafted several years back. A baseline was established. They performed above the baseline. If they did not perform above the baseline, there would be no increment or no payment back to them. And this is complying with or following through with the agreement that was previously struck with the developer of that property. That is correct.
Thank you. Councilor Fillmore?
I may have missed it, but I'm curious, what is the amount we're talking about?
So the dollar amount is $38,623.75, which means that's the amount that they performed above the base. The baseline on this one, I believe, was somewhere in the order of $90,000.
Okay.
So the city continues to receive that portion, the $90,000. Anything that they perform above it, not anything, but up to a certain dollar amount, they would get that back only if they perform above the base. So it's always post-performance.
Okay.
This is a 10-year deal, so we'll come back to the council 9 more times on this particular agreement there in Eastbay.
Okay. And I'm curious, does that 38,000 represent more or less than was originally predicted?
The original, I didn't hear that last part, Councilmember.
Sam, I'm interested to know if the 38,000 that is now being paid over to East Bay, if that is more or less than the original projections.
So we didn't really project. What we did do is we determined what they were currently paying. And again, because it's post-performance, if they did not perform better than the base, they would get nothing. If they performed above the base, they would be able to get a portion of the sales tax back within 10 years. And if there is still time left on the remaining 10 years, once they get half of it back, which they had invested about, I think it was $2.2 million into the center, they're able to recoup half of that. Again, the thought is if they get all of their money back, they will have performed very, very well, which means the center would have to be doing very, very well. So this is actually probably slightly less than they had anticipated, but they probably also didn't anticipate COVID. And Ross was, some of the businesses were actually shut down for a while and not operating, or operating with very minimal hours, or they, as you probably saw during this pandemic, that some stores limited the number of people in. And so shopping may have been down in some of these areas. But right now, the center is mostly full. And when we started this deal, it was about half full. So they really have made a lot of progress in backfilling some of those vacant spaces.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll open it up for public hearing then. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this item?
If we could show the slide in case anybody's looking for that phone number and meeting ID. Thank you. And for those who are watching on YouTube or Facebook, that information is included with the agenda with each of these broadcasts. So you should be able to find the same information there.
All right, it's not looking like we have any members of the public who wish to comment on this item. So we will close public comment and bring it back to the council for any further discussion. If there is no discussion on the part of the council, then I'll call for a vote on the implied motion. Councilor Harding?
Yes.
Councilor Handley?
Yes.
Councilor Hoban?
Yes.
Councilor Fillmore?
Yes.
Councilor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councilor Shipley?
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes also. Moving on to item number 2, which is an implied motion on an ordinance amending the zone map classification of about approximately 3/10 of an acre, generally located at 619 North, 500 West, from RC to professional office. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they're encouraged to call in or sign in now. This item will be presented by Aaron Ardmore.
Okay, thank you. If we could pull up the slides, just to orient with where this request is. So on the property, there's a current medical business office that's been there since 1980. The zoning on the ground is residential conservation, which was placed on the property in 2002. This request comes from the property owners and business owners there, desiring to expand the building, just a slight addition on the south portion. The RC zone does not allow for any expansion of the footprint. So they were forced to look at a zone change. So they spoke with staff. Because of the existing and proposed uses of this property, the professional office zone made the most sense. So that is the request tonight. As you can see on the general plan of the city, this property is designated as a commercial property, as well as property around it. There is a question earlier in the study session from Councilor Harding, which was also a question of the Planning Commission when this came through their review of why this only this property was being rezoned. So the applicant asked for this property to be rezoned, so staff is just responding to that request. But we did receive direction from the Planning Commission as planning staff to study this corridor. If you zoomed out, there's quite a few properties that are in the RC zone along 500 West, this portion of State Street that could probably be changed. They have been and probably will continue to be commercial, different varieties of commercial property. So staff has been tasked with going back and looking at those properties, addressing what might be the best fits for a zone change and discussing those prospective zone changes with the property owners. But as far as tonight, it's just this single request for this property owner. The Planning Commission did recommend approval on this request. Staff doesn't see any issue with the change to the PO zone, as the property would meet the lot standards and permitted uses for that zone. it would help to attain principles, policies, goals of the general plan in retaining and helping keep and progress commercial property in the city. So it was the staff's conclusion. If you have any other questions, please let me know.
Any questions for Mr. Ardmore? All right. Do we have a neighborhood chair here for this item? Or first, I should ask if the applicant wants to say anything in regards to this.
Yeah, the applicant is in the panel list right now.
This is Eric Jones. I am actually I represent the applicant. And I am a panelist. I was they were good enough to make me a panelist. Anyway, I would just like to say that we're very excited for this project and this property. I think this rezone makes a lot of sense. The one clarification I want to make sure that I'll just mention is you mentioned an addition onto the building, and really what we're doing is we're putting a canopy over the entry, the new entry, and then a concrete pad there. So it's pretty unobtrusive, but something that I think would be a good minor addition to the building there. But we're just very excited to see this project move forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions for Mr. Jones? All right, seeing none, is there a neighborhood chair representing this area that is here tonight?
Eric Chase is the North Park neighborhood chair, but I don't see him calling in. So,
okay.
He didn't send anything ahead that I'm aware of either.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Then we'll open the item for public comment. I just see two attendees. I think they may be here for the third item. So unless you're seeing something, Karen?
No, I believe they're for the next item. And as always, we encourage people to start dialing in at the beginning of the item rather than waiting for this moment in time.
Okay.
But we have promised a minute, so we've got another 15 seconds for that.
Okay.
It looks like we have no callers.
All right, seeing none, then we'll close public comment and bring this back to the council for discussion. I'll note that this is the first hearing on this item coming from the Planning Commission, and it does meet the qualifications if the council determines that it's a routine item and wants to take action tonight, and unless a council member requests that it be continued, we could vote on it tonight. First, I'll ask if there's any discussion on the item. Is there any counselor that desires to consider this item again at the next council meeting? Seeing no discussion and no request to consider the item again, we may now proceed to vote on the implied motion. I'll start with Councilor Shipley.
Yes.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Councilor Fillmore.
Yes.
Councilor Hoban.
Yes.
Councilor Handley.
Yes.
Councilor Harding.
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes, making that a unanimous vote. We will now move on to item number 3. an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 8.5 acres, generally located near 1724 South State Street. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, we encourage you to call in or sign in now. This item will be presented by Brandon Larson.
Thank you, Chair. Brandon Larson, Development Services. You've seen this a few times, so I'll just, if you could go down a few slides to the concept plan. I think it's down there a few slides. One more, a couple more. There we go. That'll work. So again, we have a 204 unit development proposal. They're proposing to rezone multiple zones to the MDR zone, facilitate 30 townhomes and a number of 1 and 2 bedroom units. You'll remember that the Planning Commission approved this concept plan and recommended approval of the rezone to the MDR zone, which is in harmony with the neighborhood and general plan. Since our last meeting, that we had quite a bit of discussion at our last meeting. Since then, the applicant has met with members of the council, some who had expressed concerns about safety, and met with city staff and had some productive meetings. The applicant had also has been in discussions, had discussions with Treeside Charter School and trying to resolve some of the concerns that have been identified in our previous meetings. And so I'll let the developer talk about, the developer's proffered a development agreement, and I'll let him explain. I'll let the developer's agent explain what they're proffering and what things they're proposing, what safety mitigation measures they're willing to take to try to make this a little safer. Again, staff feels like, even as it's proposed now, we feel like this is a better situation that this offers. We feel like this proposal, as it stands, even before these new safety mitigation measures, we feel like it already was a step in the right direction by facilitating traffic movement to 1640 South. I will note that staff did look at a couple of things while we were gone. While we've been away from our last meeting, one of the things that we noted was quite a bit of stacking, queuing up to the north. I don't know if you up on the road that kind of bisects the northern portion of the property. We noticed quite a bit of queuing that was occurring on that property. That's going through the applicant's property, and you can see a picture of that. And I'll let the applicants get into that more, but that was something that staff did witness firsthand. But we again feel like this is a good fit for the area. We feel like it's helpful to have some additional housing units, including 30 townhomes that we feel attract families that will bring some stability to the area. And so with that, staff would again recommend the council that they recommend approval of or that they approve this rezone application.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. So did you say that the developer will now present their?
If you're ready for him, the developer is ready to address a few things with you.
Okay, please proceed.
Yes, the agreement. Agreement, is it available for viewing, the development agreement?
Yes. Let's see if I can
screen share.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
I just want to make certain you had it. I'll ask you to pull it up there when I get to the proposed site plan.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to turn my video on. Yes, that's fine. I do have it. If somebody in the background while you're presenting can give me host rights so that I can put it up when it's time, then I'll be ready.
Okay. So we appreciate your taking time to address this issue again tonight. We appreciate the staff and your patience and your diligence in making certain that all of the issues are addressed properly. I think we all agree that, at least for the development agreement, what we're trying to address is a problem that the school has and a need that the developer has. And the development agreement will resolve both those issues. And so what I'd like to do just for a moment is to highlight what the problem is that the school has. And Mr. Larson just showed a picture of it, this stacking. But Mr. Mullen provided a PowerPoint presentation, and if you, I think you've got it there. If we can turn to slide number 6, it will facilitate the discussion. So on this slide, this was in the school's traffic study when they were developing this project, and it shows what the circulation is supposed to be. And on the north end of that road that has a little knuckle on it and goes down, that's a fire access road. If you go to slide number 7, this is a better picture of it. And you'll see on the right-hand side is the classroom building. That was the subject of the first lease that the school has. And then this building on the left is the gymnasium, which is the subject of the second lease, which is the lease in which they said that these road areas would be non-exclusive. If you go to number 9, please. This is an aerial, and this shows what the problem is. You'll see the green arrows come in off of State Street, and then they go and they follow the green arrows, and then they go past the knuckle and the fire access road, and then they go up into the property that's not theirs, and they do a little turnaround all the way up at the end. Somebody's come in and filled in a drainage ditch there, it looks like to me. So if you have the right vehicle, you can actually drive out onto 1640. And we'll see some pictures here of what happens in this stacking. So if you'll go to slides 10 through 13, and you can just kind of go through those, you'll see these cars. That's the stacking that occurs in that area. Next one, please. Again, now you're looking at it, looking from the school north, and you're seeing that stacking kind of in the turnaround. They're in the turnaround at the end by 1640. This is an employee of the school who's going by and talking to the parents and asking which grade, so they know who they're picking up and on where to pick them up. And then that's the stacking again, which is the problem. I think that's enough there. So if we go to slide 23. I don't know if you can read that, but essentially it says, this is again from their traffic study. And what that sentence says is that this is a problem that happens with every school, that you're going to have these kinds of issues, the traffic problems for the 20-minute period before school and the 20 minutes before it starts and 20 minutes after, and then the same thing at the end of the day. You go to slide 25, please. Okay, and this one is again from their traffic study, and the important part here is that you'll see the sentence there. It says they may need to have, or it says that it was anticipated that the first one, the proposed site is also anticipated to have future development that accesses the school access. So that was always the plan with this particular project. So to address those issues, and we've talked about it before, but Mr. Mullen and his team have met and they provided, even before last city council meeting, some suggested solutions. And then since then, they've made some other suggested additional solutions. I've had a conversation for about an hour, a little over that, with Erin Preston, who's the school's lawyer, last Thursday. Sent to her our proposed terms on Friday. She came back on Monday and said that there was 2 that they could not agree to, and then this morning sent a letter with more detail as to why. But if you can put up the site plan, kind of got my hand going on it, that would be great. Yeah, right there. You'll have to scroll up, but you'll see where that circle is. The proposal was to put a gate there. And during the time that they're picking up or dropping off students. The other proposal that we made that you haven't seen before was down a little lower. It's a little hard to see, but when you come into the access, right where that break is in the Esplanade, that we would provide a crossing guard or traffic person there to direct traffic, so that if anybody is coming into the residential areas or leaving the residential areas, that person can assist them merge into the traffic, and so it wouldn't cause any more congestion there. And now, Brian, I think we're ready to have the, well, let me talk about the circulation. So I think if you all see 1640 there on the right-hand side, I think the natural flows that was going to happen with this development is that people are going to start going up 1640. They then go around down, you can't see it on the screen, it's at the top of the screen, but come down Spring Creek Drive. And then when they get to the end of, and part of our proposal is to do our portion of that drive. And you get to the end of that, and then you come to what I've called the fire access road. It's there's a portion that's not paved. We would pave that and then use that road. And so the people would come in off of 1640 and loop all the way around there, which solves their stacking problem. And then they go in front of the school as proposed, and then out the other way. The school, we think that the school or they're leasing all of the property on which that fire access road is. If they're unwilling to provide that as a part of the solution, Mr. Mullen and his team have agreed that they will build an access road immediately adjacent to that that fire access. So that would complete the circle there. Brian, I think I'm now ready for the agreement itself.
Okay, let me put that up. Okay, that should be up for you. So let me call out just the one question on this page, just for the council's reference, and I'll scroll down to the specific conditions section for you to talk about, which is, so this is a draft that we've received, and Craig and I, Mr. Carlisle and I have been exchanging drafts back and forth today. Just so the council's aware, one of the questions that I raised is that South State Development is proposed to be the party to this agreement, at least in the current draft, but they don't yet own the property. And so one of the comments I made to Mr. Carlisle was that at some point, the actual owner of the property either needs to be a party to the agreement, or we need to change the agreement so that it doesn't actually take effect until the transfer of ownership occurs, or we run into this weird situation where the rezone happens the instant the development agreement is entered into, but doesn't actually apply to the owner of the property. And so then if they choose to do something else with it, they're not bound. So I just throw that out there for something to discuss later on. And then scrolling down here, 4A was something that was mistakenly copied from a previous agreement, so I've deleted it. And then the rest of it, Mr. Carlisle can walk through.
Okay, as to the first point about the developer, the current owner having to sign on it, we understand that. I was trying to get a hold of Mr. Morley the last 45 minutes before we got here. I haven't been able to get that solved, but we can work around that. Obviously, you're going to need, I think we agree that you're going to need his signature in any event. I think we have an agreement on that one. So if you go through these, paragraph B is that the developer will complete his portion of the Spring Creek Drive. We actually think the city's committed to do half of that drive. Then the down to that fire access lane. C, I've already talked about. We'll do the fire access. We'll either extend the fire access road out to Spring Creek Drive, or we would build another drive immediately north of that. D, we said we'd put the gate where we indicated, and that it would be closed 30 minutes before school started and 30 minutes after it starts, and then the same thing at the end of school. E is The crossing guard that we talked about up there where the break in the esplanade was to facilitate any residences that may be coming in or leaving the development at the same time schools coming or starting or ending. F is simply that if the school or the buildings ever cease to be used as a school, then these conditions that we've talked about to facilitate, like the gate and the crossing guard, would no longer be necessary. And then G is that it's a kind of a catch-all, which is that there wouldn't be any other restrictions of access or use on the property other than what we have in this agreement. And then H is that we will work diligently with the Utah Department of Transportation to try to get that light out there on 1640 and State Street. We will do that. We think, frankly, that once this gets going, that there will be enough warrants to make it happen. But obviously, as you know, that's up to the state. And then I is that the final plat cannot be recorded until the project has all the services needed for the development. So that's basically, other than that, the agreement is the template that Provo City uses, and those are the conditions and terms. The school has now said that they can't agree with C and G. And C is the access on the fire access road, and G is cross access across the property. And they raised essentially 4 arguments. One is that the conditions of Provo City's conditional use permit precludes what we are proposing, the conditional use permit that they got. 2 is that the UDOT conditional access permit precludes what we propose. 3 is that Provo City Code street design, the design for the street fronts on that on State Street would require additional accesses into the project from State Street. Apparently, where anytime you've got another structure there, at least according to their argument, is you'd have to have another cut in the road. And then number 4 is that Mr. Morley, who is Zion's M13, who's the lessor of the property for the school and the person we're buying the property from, the cross parking agreement that he has recorded on the property, the school suggests that that's not a cross access, that's only cross parking. We've given to the city today a letter from Mr. Morley indicating that he would grant the cross access to the extent there's any question about that. So the first one, the conditions about the conditional use permit, they attach the conditional use permit to their letter, and I don't see the restriction that they apparently are quoting in that conditional use permit. And I'm looking at Mr. Larson, and he doesn't find that restriction either. I guess, was that fair for me to speak to you?
That is fair. I did not see it either.
Okay. The UDOT conditional access permit, if you read it carefully, it has nothing to do with the use of that access by the owners or users of the property. It's a permit that UDOT gives to somebody who's going to do a road cut to be able to use the State Street and do some of the work off of State Street under certain conditions while they build that access. But it has nothing to do with who uses the access or limits who gets to use that access. And so I think you can read that and reach that same conclusion. The way I read the Provo City Code about entries off of State Street, you just need to have an entry off of State Street so that the fronts on these developments look good, so you don't have all these driveways coming out onto State Street. And so I think they're misreading that code provision. And then I've already addressed the last one, that Mr. Morley has already committed to give the cross access across those roads, which solves the congestion and the problems that the school already is experiencing, which is evident by the fact that they're stacking on property that they don't have a right to. And it certainly solves our issue at a significant greater expense to Mr. Mullen, but also at a significantly greater safety component for the school. So from our perspective, we think that this proposal solves all those issues, makes it a much safer development. And for those reasons and all of the other reasons that you've talked about over the last several weeks, that Planning staff has approved it. The planning commission's approved it. The neighborhood chair approves it. The economic development director has talked about what the needs are for economic development. In any event, for all those reasons, we recommend and request that the city grant this application. And that's all I have, unless you have questions for me.
Councilor Hoban.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to the developers and also to city staff for trying to find ways to make this work. I guess, so Brian, I mean, we can't force the school to do anything, of course, to enter into any sort of agreement. So it sounds like some of these, well, and I don't even know if it makes sense to have some of these things included in there, such as, you know, C and G, you know, developer, well, in any case, a tree side giving access to that unpaved portion of the drive, fire, I believe it's called fire access. And then G being, you know, some sort of shared access agreement. So, I mean, really, it seems like those probably need to come out. Is that correct, Brian? Or, I mean, if the school's not agreeable to that, those would have to come out of the development agreement, right? And even if the school were, it's not really our place to have that in a development agreement, would it be?
Well, I think you make a good point. With regard to what you see on your screen as F, but was originally G, it probably shouldn't say that Treeside and the developer will enter into agreement, since the Treeside's not a party to the development agreement, so they can't be promising to enter into this. But we could leave it in here, though, as something that developer will, in good faith, attempt to enter into an agreement, or we could, my understanding, actually having seen the recorded easement, is that it was a single party recorded easement. And especially if we, going back to my previous comment, if the current owner of the property becomes a party to this agreement, we could amend this paragraph so that it says something like, owner will record a cross-access easement granting that access, and then it becomes irrelevant whether Treeside really agrees to it or not. You know, assuming that the owner is amenable to that. And then with regard to former C, now B on the screen, the fire access road, I guess it's a question of, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the school would be agreeing to. If the school's contention is that the developer can't pave that road because Treeside has exclusive use to it, then yeah, the developer's not, that probably needs to come out. If on the other hand, but we could again say, if the city council believes that the best interest of the community or that road be paved, we could always say developer will pave the unpaved portion of that drive to the extent permitted, to the extent legally permitted, or something to that effect.
Well, and I think they were stating that if Treeside won't let them, that they'll just do it on the immediately adjacent to it on their property then.
Right. And
so we can throw something like that in there instead.
Right. And just as a point of kind of procedure, recognize that this agreement doesn't have to be in final form before you can vote on the rezone, because the way the rezone ordinance is drafted is that the mayor is authorized to negotiate and execute a development agreement that matches the representations made in this meeting. So as long as the developer and the council are clear and in agreement on what those points are, we can negotiate and finalize the legal terms of the agreement later.
And I think so. Just for the record, then I'd say that the statements you made about C and G, or C and F, I can't get it straight. That what you just said as far as how we resolve those issues, I think I would like to see that in final form eventually. I understand not today. I personally think that, the way that traffic will be routed down 1640 and then down Spring Creek Drive and across the school, and then they exit out State Street. I mean, to me, that's almost a perfect solution for these queuing issues, especially considering the school is queuing up on property they don't own right now. See, that property, just so everyone's aware, that little street or that property that the school is queuing up on, that's not in question. That's not the street or property in question. So, you know, I'm looking at it like, where would the school queue up if that were taken away? And so, you know, the Spring Creek Drive really does solve a lot of issues here. And so I just want to say, I appreciate the developer being willing to, you know, at the expense, being willing to try to find a way to make this all work. Offering, you know, the gate and a crossing guard. Yeah, I think it really does alleviate a lot of these safety concerns. I think those are all the questions that I had. I guess, and Brian, you've got your hand up, so I'll let you speak. But I guess the question I would have for the developer is those changes that Brian just mentioned to C and G. Are they comfortable with them? And you know, if so, I guess that's the question. Would they like to move forward knowing that those would be two changes that would have to be made to the agreement or not? So go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, and I appreciate you letting me speak, because I think we'll probably want to ask Mr. Carlisle to address this or at least be aware of this issue as well, although I think this is going to be a little bit of news to him. But if you're looking at, I just had one additional comment, which is if you're looking at what is now A, formerly B, which is about the completion of the Spring Creek Drive. Mr. Carlisle mentioned in his presentation that his understanding was that the developer was only going to have to do half the width of this road. The current draft contemplates the full width, and there were some emails exchanged between myself, Mr. Pepperoni, and engineering just before this meeting started about the fact that while normally it probably would be the developer's responsibility to only do half, the other developments that have developed along Spring Creek Drive have in the past done the entire width because the opposite side of the road is the railroad, and the railroad doesn't do their half. So I think it would be engineering's expectation that the entire width be done. And so I just wanted to raise that, knowing that you may have to go talk to your client about that.
So I'll answer the first two issues that Mr. Hoban raised. Those are acceptable to the developer because either we're going to build that one road next to the access road, and we already have a commitment from Mr. Morley that he would do the cross access. So those two are acceptable to us. It's the width of the road and the development and the cost of that road. That's a new issue for us. And yeah, I would have to talk to Don Mullen, but
that's what else is.
Sorry.
So if that's what everybody else is required to do, it's the same as everybody else, and that's a common thing for us to do.
So he's telling me that if that's what everybody else has been required to do, then he'll do it. We might try to twist your arm, but that's.
All right, thank you. I'm done with my questions. Thanks, Chair.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yeah, this is probably a question for Brian Jones. I'm curious about this crossing guard. If there is a time or a day when the crossing guard doesn't show up, or maybe they don't show up one day, maybe they just don't show up ever again after, I don't know. What is Provo City's liability for that person or that position being staffed? Do we have to enforce that position being staffed on the developer in perpetuity, or tell me about that?
Well, I don't see, and I'd have to scroll down here. I think there's a standard provision in here about indemnification for failure to abide by, trying to look real quick.
I'm just not familiar with a development agreement where we've ever done something like that.
Well, and we haven't. Probably the bigger problem than liability for me raise to you as counselors is the impracticability of the city actually enforcing it. I'm not necessarily concerned that there's a liability issue where if the developer doesn't do that, the city becomes liable. But if the developer doesn't do that, what's the penalty? I mean, the penalty is that the city has to take the time to go seek an injunction or a breach of contract action in fact, now that I'm thinking about this, what we probably actually ought to do, and we've done in the past, I'm thinking three things at the same time. The city would have to go try to enforce this, which is difficult to do and time consuming and likely to be forgotten and unlikely to be done unless, the crossing guard's not there for an extended period of time. Additionally, the agreement actually terminates once all the permits are issued and the development is done. That's our normal term, rather than to have this go on in perpetuity. What we've actually done in the past is require that as a requirement for the permits to actually issue, that the homeowners association have already been formed, and that the homeowners association, the HOA rules include this requirement. Of course, then the problem is that's really something that the HOA has to enforce going forward, and where it's not actually their own interests that are being protected, but the schools. I don't know that that's very tenable either. Trying to brainstorm, one other option is to kind of do something like we did with this cross access agreement, where what we actually require in this paragraph is that the developer promise to, in good faith, to attempt to enter into an agreement with the school that will be done, so that the school actually has the right to enforce it.
I would be most comfortable if we removed that part about the crossing guard. There's a lot of promises that are made to citizens via development agreements or HOAs. And then 20 years later, whoever's on the council is going to be hearing about it. The council said in 2021 that you wouldn't let so many cars park in here, or people live in here, or a crossing guard not be employed here. So if we can't keep the commitment, I'd rather it not be in there.
It's just a combination.
Councilor Holman?
I was going to say that, so having gone and observed traffic, and so if the Spring Creek Road does become the stacking road, and then people exit out to State Street, at that point, there will be no children. Everyone will be in their car. They will have either been dropped off or picked up and in a vehicle at that point. Now, of course, there might be children crossing from State Street who walk to the school. I'm not sure. But my personal opinion is that a crossing guard isn't necessary there. The school does have a crossing guard right where the children are being dropped off and picked up, and that makes sense to me. But at that point, everybody's in their car and leaving. So I would say I would agree with Council Member Ellsworth that could come out, unless I don't know what the conversations have been between the developer and the school, if that was something that, the school expressed, a desire to have, and the developer wanted to agree to that or what. But from my standpoint, it doesn't need to be in there. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you. David Day?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to that section. I think it was B that Brian was talking about on the half width versus the whole width. I think if you go back to the site plan, you'll recognize that whole width only comes down to that fire access. And it is only a local road width. It's not a larger collector. So those are things that which we have normally had the developers build the full width. And that has happened on all of the developments along South State Street so far. So I don't know if that helps clarify any of that.
Thank you. All right, are there any further questions for the developer before we open this up for public comment? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We will now ask if the neighborhood chair is present and wishes to comment. I think she is, yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am impressed with the additional talks that have gone on since our last meeting. I still believe, and this neighborhood believes, that this is a good thing for us down here. It looks like great time has been put into coming up with a development agreement that that covers those most important things. One other thing that I was hoping to make everyone aware of this evening, even if the families who, should this development move forward, even if those families with children do not attend Treeside, the public school system has their transportation rules and everything. It's fairly fluid. Where we have lived for a very long time on the west side of State Street, and our children did attend Spring Creek, there was a bus route here. So even aside from Treeside Charter School, anyone who would be going to Spring Creek, if that be their choice, that would be looked at by the transportation department with the school, and they would make arrangements to make sure that those children were safe as well. I actually spoke with someone who is a trainer for the bus transportation today, and she said it's a fairly fluid thing, so it's something that they watch regularly. I do believe that being able to narrow the concerns of the school down to basically not so much a student safety as was brought out, but rather a stacking issue, a congestion issue, whatever we want to call it there. I can only reiterate again that this neighborhood, at both neighborhood meetings, there were no objections to this development happening. Everyone seemed to stand behind it, and the only concerns were the traffic congestion, which, we additionally took to the city and said, hey, are we looking at all of these things? And since then, we've been informed that, yes, the city has been watching this as it goes on. So I'm hoping tonight that that everyone can be of the same mind. It's okay for us to disagree. That's not a big deal. Your opinion is important, but it's important, too, that we look at what is best for this area of town. And I think all of those things have been covered. I certainly don't need to go into those tonight. And what is best for the neighborhood as well as the city. And, bottom line, after all of this, we end up with some more streets that are curb and gutter, sidewalk, the whole 9 yards. So it's a win-win. And I'm hoping tonight that as you consider what your decision will be on this, you will take all of this into account. Currently, we don't have yes, we are in a district that has a council member over it, but we do not have a council member who lives in our neighborhood and can speak just for this neighborhood. And so I'm hoping that, again, as I said, that as you consider this tonight, you consider all of the aspects of it, keeping, I would hope, foremost in line that this development aligns with both the general plan, and I know it's undergoing some changes, but at this moment, it aligns. And it also aligns with the Southeast Area Plan, both of which have been accepted by the city. That's really all I have to say tonight. Please just know how much behind this project our neighborhood is. It will be a good thing.
Ms.
Thank you.
Miller, could you, I forgot to remind you to state your first and last name and city of residence for the record.
Oh, of course. My name is Mary Miller, and I live in Provo on Mountain Vista Lane.
Thank you so much.
You're
Okay, we have several other people with their hands raised. I just want to remind you, like I just mentioned, that you need to state your name and city of residence for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. We have someone listed as BJ Taylor. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm BJ Taylor. I actually live in Salem, but I'm on the school board for Treeside. First off, I would just like to request a chance for our lawyer to maybe respond to all the things that the builder's lawyer said. And he had a lot of time to speak, and our lawyer will be limited to 2 minutes unless otherwise authorized. And he said a lot of things that I'm sure our lawyer will want to respond to. Second off, I want you to know that, again, we do like the idea of building these townhomes. We're not opposed to that. We're just really actually not concerned about the children's safety here. And there's been a lot of talk about the queuing issue as being our primary concern, and that's not our primary concern. Our primary concern is the drop-off and loading zone and having cars that are going through that are late to work or trying to get to class. And frankly, I've been in that area when you're trying to get through, and if you're dropping off a kid, you may be waiting there for 5-10 minutes, and frankly, that's not a great situation to have people who are late to school or late to work in, and especially when the thing that would be slowing them down is the safety of kids. And that is the issue that we keep coming back to, and everyone else keeps talking about this queuing issue as if that's our issue. That's a side issue, and it is a concern, but it's not our primary concern. And legally, we cannot. And when we came to this place, we made agreements with the state fire marshal and UDOT, basically saying that we would have explicit access to this loading and unloading area, and yeah, and we cannot legally go back on that obligation and say, yeah, we'll share that. And lastly, I would just say that, and we really do want what's best for everybody. We're not against the builder here. We just want to keep the kids safe. That is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Next, we have a caller whose phone number ends in 5650. Go ahead and press *6 to unmute your telephone. State your first and last name and city of residence for the record. You now have 2 minutes to comment.
My name is April Clausen, and I live in Mapleton, and I am the school board chair of the Treeside. And I just wanted to reiterate what BJ has already said, that the school, when we came onto the property, we had to make agreements with UDOT, with the state education department, with the fire marshal, and we do not have a way as a school to go against those agreements. And the Provo City Council also at that time had agreements that we needed to do, which we did do. So if you guys vote for this, you're going against what the former city council told us to do. Lastly, our landlord cannot make suggestions on what it is we can and cannot do. That is part of our lease. So I would invite you to, once again, read all the emails and the communications that we have sent you, because they are vital to your decision. Thank you.
Karen, I would like to know, we would like to give the school's attorney an opportunity to respond, and she can take a little bit more than 2 minutes. We'd also like to note that we're not envisioning the school as being a party to a development agreement, and we're not intending to get involved in any dispute between the school and other parties. So within reason, but That having been said, within reason, we would like to give her an opportunity to respond.
So honestly, I'm not sure which of the callers in this list is that attorney.
Okay.
So we just, yeah, without knowing the number, and I didn't jot it down from the previous meeting. Maybe if that person, when they start, yeah, as soon as we get to her, we can give her more time. So if you are the attorney, let us know as soon as we open the line, and we can make adjustments for the time. And Chair Sewell, if you can indicate how much time or whether or not to put a timer up, we can accommodate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we will go to Dave Connect. Go ahead, and you should have a prompt to unmute yourself now. I know I've stated your name, but I still want you to say it officially and say your city of residence for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Dave Connect, Provo City. And I really appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this. I like the plan for the stacking. I realize there are still differences between the school and developer, which apparently will have to be solved in a different venue with lawyers and whatever. But I think it's pretty clear that the council is in a position to rezone this and move forward. I believe it should move forward. I'm a little disappointed that the school is not offering options, possibilities, or tweaks to what is being proposed. Instead, it's pretty much opposed to anything and everything that the developer is offering. And it would seem that the school's preference would be that no development happen here virtually. So that's really unfortunate, but I really do like the plan that's been worked out. It's taken time, and I think it's at added expense of the developer, but he's willing to do that. So I look forward to seeing this project built someday, and I hope you vote for it tonight.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, I believe we've been told that this next caller should be the attorney. So caller with the last 4 digits, 9520. Go ahead and press *6 to unmute your phone. And Mr. Sewell, is there a particular time you'd like her to stick to?
Let's make it 5 minutes.
Okay, and please start by saying your first and last name and city of residence for our records.
Thank you very much. My name is Erin Preston. I am the attorney for the school. My personal residence is in Harriman, Utah. I have been working with the school for approximately 2 years now on items related to the lease and other things that are impacted by what you guys are doing today. I appreciate the additional time to speak to the concerns that the school has. First of all, I would like to start by thanking the board and the staff for all the time that has been spent on this. I want to give particular thanks to Member Hoban, Sewell, and Fillmore, who came out and viewed the traffic at Treeside and who have made efforts to come to a compromise solution. The reality, though, is that no compromise solution can exist. We cannot give you what we don't have to give. So I'm going to start first with the conversation that Mr. Carlisle, representative for Remington, mentioned us having last Thursday. He had taken from previous conversations that Treeside would agree to provide access to Remington Commons to go through 1724, which is the school's exclusive access. We are going to keep saying that, if they agree to the other items. I said that we could not give that access, or that we could not give that agreement, because those things are governed by UDOT, by the State Fire Marshal, and others that we made commitments to, including Provo City, that mandated that entry at 1724 be a private access entry as a condition for issuing our construction permit. To that suggestion that we would agree so long as UDOT, State Fire Marshal, Provo, and others to whom we had made our commitments agree to allow us to make that commitment, Mr. Carlisle declined, saying that put too much risk on Remington. I replied saying that Treeside Charter School could not take on Remington's risk on the school on behalf of the developer. That was the point at which that conversation ended. Beyond that, several more things. I did a grandma request to UDOT last week to search for any record that Remington Commons has been in discussion or development with UDOT, whether an application had been made, communication has been had with UDOT, in which Remington sought to gain their own access agreement or make any modifications to the 1724 access. I received that response today. There is no evidence of any communication being had by Remington developers, agents, anyone related to that access or related to gaining additional access. So their statements to us and to you regarding working with UDOT at least don't show up in UDOT's records. We don't think that at this point we think it's possible at this point that they have not contacted UDOT and they're trying to backdoor this by getting us to agree to something and you to agree to something that in reality only UDOT can agree to. By the way, I just sent you all an email that lists out the state administrative code regarding who can grant access to a state road and one of the provisions regarding that access, one of which, of course, is change in land use type and intensity, which is exactly the case right now on 1724. If you go down further, increase of 20%, that's easily the case within the numbers they have already produced. This needs to go before UDOT. This needs to get UDOT's permission before anything moves forward. 4G. Obviously, I think it's been stated already, Treeside can't agree to anything, can't agree to a cross-access agreement. It's not ours to give. It's also not Mr. Morley's to give. Neither was the cross-parking permit access. That is in litigation right now. The school entered into their lease and agreement with Mr. Morley in 2017. In 2019, he sold the same access to someone else by giving that 2019 agreement. He would be doing the same thing here. 4, to Ms. Millar and the neighborhood community meeting. Thank you for your input, but we did meet over 6 months ago. There was no traffic study done at that time, and there is still no valid traffic study. That is the first item UDOT needs to assess whether or not to grant an access permit. And this entire plan has been analyzed without a traffic study to determine amount of traffic that would be increased. In Treeside, gaining their own access, to the 1724 permit they had to do a traffic study and they had to make modifications, including a deceleration lane for the safety of those on the state road. That hasn't been done, and we don't know what will be required of UDOT, of the developer going forward. You can't proceed on this until UDOT has had the chance to hear it without incurring liability, I would argue, for the city and the school and everyone else involved, in addition to compromising the safety of the students in the school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Preston. Okay, so the next person to speak will be the caller whose number ends in 8074. You should be getting a prompt to press *6 to unmute yourself. State your first and last name and city of residence. You will now have 2 minutes to comment.
Hi, thank you. My name is Alyssa Sheehan and I live in South Provo. And I just wanted to call and reiterate the support that was mentioned earlier from the neighborhood. I've been in this neighborhood for a couple years and I'm really looking forward and hoping that this development will pull through. I am someone who's been renting in this neighborhood, and I'm just really excited about the opportunity and option of having more affordable housing in this area, especially South Provo. So again, just wanted to reiterate that support and think it'll be a great addition to this neighborhood, and really hope that the city will stay with the long-term plan and rezone this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are, looks like Jennifer Lloyd, you should follow the prompt on your screen to go ahead and unmute yourself. State your first and last name and your city of residence for the record.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Jennifer Lloyd. I have lived in Southeast Provo now for 13 years and am in process of moving to another area of Provo. So I consider this my neck of the woods. And as the last person just stated, it would be great to have a development like this, but as a parent with children enrolled at Treeside, as well as being a board member, I just want to restate that we are in a situation Treeside cannot provide. Remington is asking Treeside to turn over rights it does not have. And at any time, if there's a UDOT traffic study, all of that is in place, then we'd be so thrilled and excited to see the generous offers that have been put on the table. But that's just something that we don't have any oversight to be able to do at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. If we have two other callers who don't have raised hands, if you are wishing to make a comment, please press *9 to let us know you wish to speak. If not, there we go. So caller with number ending in 9095. Looks like you've unmuted yourself. Go ahead and state your first and last name and city of residence. You will have 2 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Burl Allen. I live in Provo. I've lived here for 20 years. It's interesting to me tonight that of the callers that have called in, those that either have a vested interest in maintaining status quo in a situation with the school, and those living outside the city and attorneys representing those individuals are the ones that have expressed dissent on this. This is a great development. That whole corridor there along State Street in South Provo has been perennially an eyesore. There are very few options for development in this area, particularly as it backs up against wetlands and it backs up against the train tracks in that area back there, industrial area. To me, this is a no-brainer. I understand the arguments that they want a UDOT study and other things. That seems to me that as part of approval from the city of the plan itself, and it's separate from the zoning, and that seems like a big excuse to me that's being put forth. For me, as a business owner in Provo, as well as a resident of Provo, I have people that need housing. The number one problem we face on the Wasatch front right now is affordable housing, bar none. And the only way Provo will continue to attract young, talented engineers and other things that will serve up in Lehigh, where I have an office up there and I have an office in Provo, is by providing this sort of housing. It's a great access onto the freeway. It takes congestion away from downtown Provo, and other parts of Provo that are congested, and it's a natural onboard onto the freeway and access to other parts of the valley. And this to me is such a no-brainer that I'm surprised that this has been hung up this long by the city council. And to me, my request would be the city council get off their hands and move on this as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And caller whose number ends in 1401, go ahead and unmute. There you go. State your first and last name and city of residence. You will then have 2 minutes to comment.
Hello, so my name is Eva Dobravova, and I am a longtime resident of Provo. And so as somebody who has been residing here for a really long time, it makes me wonder, which one is it? Is Mr. Morley just a rich white guy who really just gets to do whatever he wants? Or is it because he has friends in the city council? And as I mentioned before, I have lived here for a really long time. And how many times has Provo failed to provide actual legitimate parking? So it really makes me wonder, is this truly happening because he has friends in the city council? And as you can tell, I'm from a different country, and I believe America is truly the best place to be, and I have faith in the system. And this is, I think, a great opportunity for you to make the right decision. So thank you so much.
I don't see any other callers, so I think you're safe to close public comments at this time.
All right, thank you, Karen. We'll close public comment and bring this back to the council for any discussion. Councilor Ellsworth.
Thank you. This shouldn't surprise anyone, but I'm not comfortable with this development. I'll tell you why for the public record. There's on South State Street, there's about 850 plus or minus apartments and townhomes that have been built, you know, just barely off of State Street or right on State Street. And that was prior to 2017. And then since 2017, there's been about 530 apartments and townhomes approved. And so those are under construction right now. And this area does have a lot of density, which is great. A really good thing. We need density. However, what we don't have here that makes density make sense is commercial amenities. We don't have strong transit either. We don't even have good sidewalks along State Street, so it's not a great place for active transportation, and it's not a safe place for kids to walk, nor will it be until we get these infrastructure pieces in place. But that's why I'm not comfortable with this project, is because it brings density to a part of town where there are no amenities. So it doesn't make sense. I would be more comfortable with this project if it incorporated something that Southeast Provo didn't have or didn't have enough of. So I think we do have enough apartments and townhomes. More will come, no doubt, more will come. But where this has this frontage and it's pretty darn close to 1860 South, which is a strong intersection, I wish it incorporated something else, whether that was mixed use with some commercial, whether it was a lot more commercial, whether it was just a different housing type. Maybe it's the LDR, the VLDR. VLDR would be phenomenal, I think, in this area. But VLDR was not a zone when the Southeast Area Plan was created. So that's why I don't love this project, not because I have some vendetta against the developer, but simply because to me, it doesn't add anything to Southeast Provo that we don't already have. No doubt when this is built, it'll look great, but I don't think that we have to pick between a patch of weeds and what's offered us. I think that we should be looking long-term at what's best for this entire area, because it is in the Spring Creek neighborhood, but it's just across the street from the Provo South neighborhood. And what happens on this corridor affects the Mazer neighborhood. So I think we've got to look more holistically, more comprehensively at the entire corridor and the trend that we've created. And I think we've got to look long-term at, where will the citizens who live here shop? They'll probably shop in Springville. And how will we bring them the amenities that this much density requires? We don't have those answers today, not that I've ever heard. So that's why I'm not comfortable with this project, is because it doesn't bring anything new, and we're bringing density to where we don't have amenities.
Thank you. Other comments from councilors? Councilor Handley.
I want to clarify something. Last time we discussed this, I expressed my preference to wait for the legal issues to be resolved. And and many very kind things were said about the developer, and I have no doubt that those are true. And I expressed my skepticism that a development agreement could be agreed upon with the school, not because I doubted the good intentions of Mr. Mullen or Mr. Carlisle. I know them to both be people of integrity, but I sensed that there was a legal dispute that was going to make it unlikely that the school was going to agree, and that, of course, remains the case. So I remain unsatisfied with the idea of deciding on this at this point. I am in support of the development in general, and I am in support of the development agreement in general, but because there is no agreement with the school, I feel uncomfortable supporting the project until those issues get resolved. I respect the fact that I may be alone in that, and there may be good reasons to go forward with this tonight. But it would sit better with me if those issues were resolved. So I just wanted to clarify that it was. I remain convinced that that's the course of action we should take, but it has nothing to do with any suspicions or worries about good intentions. I actually think the development agreement shows a lot of good intention, and it seems like we would be pretty close to a good compromise if the school felt that it was in a position to be able to make that compromise. But for the reasons they've expressed, they don't feel comfortable at this point, and I'd rather that get resolved. So I just wanted to clarify that position. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hoban.
So I guess the way I'm looking at this is, even if the litigation is between the two parties is resolved, we still have a queuing issue. And the development agreement proposed solves the queuing issue. So the developer could build his development, finish Spring Creek Drive, allow access for the school, and the only place that there would need to be any shared access would be on the southern developments in the southern developments. Now, if litigation were to prove that the school has exclusive access to that, the developer is going to have to add a second entrance off of State Street to those southern residences. So I understand what Mr. Hanley's saying, but if this litigation goes in the favor of the school or the development, there still is a queuing issue. And the fact is that this development agreement offers a solution to that queuing issue, which is the major concern from a safety standpoint. If the developer tomorrow decided to put up a gate and say no more access to our property, the school is going to have to queue twice as many cars onto State Street than they have right now. So the way I look at it is, worst case scenario, litigation ends up where the school can't utilize the developer's property, the developer can't utilize the school's property, the developer puts in a second access on State Street, and we're good. Best case scenario is we approve this and they don't go to litigation and they work things out and they have a shared access agreement. Maybe the developer doesn't have to put in a second access on the South State. So I'm not seeing the downside of moving forward at this point, especially when we have a developer who's willing to offer an access that the school can then utilize to queue the cars up and pull them off of State Street. I don't see how UDOT's going to say no to that. There's no way UDOT's going to say, sorry, we want these cars to continue to stack on State Street. I just don't see that. I know I'm no legal expert and I'm no transportation expert either, but to me, this solves a lot of the problems. I understand the school can't agree to it, and that's fine. I think it's a great step forward that the developer is still willing to move forward, even though they don't have the school's agreement. I just don't see how the State Office of Education Construction, the fire marshal is going to say that, you know, having a bunch of cars queuing up on State Street is a better idea than having them queuing up on Spring Creek Drive. So I'm inclined to move forward at this point, given that what the developer was willing to agree to, and that it solves a lot of the issues that I was hung up on. I understand it doesn't solve some other issues that the school's hung up on, and I can appreciate where they're coming from. But it does address the things that I was hung up on.
Thank you, Mr. Homan. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Chair Sewell. Let me just preface my comments by saying that none of this should be construed as advocating for one outcome or another with regard to the actual vote. I don't have a dog in that fight or even an opinion about the actual rezone. But my job, I think, is to advocate for what the rights of the council are and make sure that they understand what they can and can't do. And so that's the only thing that my comments are intended to address. So let me back up and say that from my perspective, I didn't ever anticipate that the school would be satisfied with something that the developer offered, just from kind of my view of what I was seeing on it. More than that, I also never anticipated that they would actually be a party to any agreement or be signing off on something. And as your counsel, I would never have recommended that be what you hang your hat on or be the triggering event for you. If you think about the development agreement discussions we've had before, and when you've been asked about development agreements before, think about it from the same way. I would never, if you had a rezone before you that the neighborhood or a significant portion of the neighborhood was opposed to, I would never advocate to you that you should wait until the neighborhood is satisfied with the development agreement before you agree to it. Instead, my counsel to you has always been, listen to what the neighborhood's concerns are, take those of them that you agree with as your own concerns, and when those concerns are satisfied, then the development agreement should satisfy what you want to have happen. And so I'd take that same model here. The school has raised safety concerns. To the degree that you share those safety concerns, then do that independently of what the school thinks about it. Adopt those safety concerns as your own. Consider what the developer has proffered to you. And if what it's been proffered satisfies your concerns, then you are okay to go forward with the rezone, and the development agreement accomplishes what you have asked the developer to accomplish in order to achieve the rezone. Now, with respect to the school's arguments, I'll also say I have complete sympathy for, and in fact even anticipated their statement that they can't sign on to the agreement. Now, on the one hand, they never would have, because they never would have been a party to the agreement. But on the other hand, I totally get where they're coming from. And if I were their legal counsel, I would probably also say to them, don't give up rights you're not sure you can, and don't give up rights that you want to argue for, even if you think you can. But we need to understand what the development agreement does. The development agreement does not grant the developer access that they don't already have. It doesn't require Treeside to give them access to anything that they don't already have access to. The only thing the development agreement does is it commits the developer in exchange for the rezone to do extra things and to give up rights that they would normally have in the rezone. So at the end of the day, if the council approves the rezone and accepts the development agreement and the school's legal arguments prevent development, the school's legal arguments will still prevent development, even if the council has approved the rezone and the development agreement has been executed. In which case, the development agreement says that the developer can't build anything other than what they've shown us, and so nothing will be built, and we'll be in the same situation we were before the rezone was even proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, for that helpful clarification. Mr. Fillmore.
You're muted, Mr. Fillmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Mr. Jones' clarifications. My understanding is that tonight all we are asked to do is vote on a rezone coupled with a development agreement, period. If that's correct, that makes our decision a little clearer anyway. My concern has always been the safety issues for the children, and it seems to me that what the developer is willing to do would to some extent increase that safety factor. I guess what I'm still concerned about is there have been several things mentioned primarily by the attorney for Treeside, but also by some of the callers, that there are several parties out there that either have a veto or could claim a breach of contract and just multiply the legal issues. And I'm wondering if Mr. Jones has looked into that, so we have some sense of the complexities that we might be stepping into here if we approve a rezone. Not to mention delays and everything else. We've got the State Education Board, we've got UDOT, we've got the lessor, we've got a pending lawsuit. I'm just wondering if all of that creates so much complexity that it's premature to grant the rezone tonight. Mr. Jones, do you have an opinion on any of those alleged roadblocks?
Well, no, I don't, because frankly, I haven't looked at any of them, but I intentionally haven't looked at them because I don't think that they're relevant to the council's decision. And for the reasons that I just explained a few moments ago. If any of those roadblocks actually prevent the development from taking place, then it won't take place, even if the rezone has been granted. So to that extent, I think that those are private third-party legal disputes that the council should not take an adjudicative role in. There was some mention of it going against the city, and that's new to me and something that Development Services may want to weigh in on if it's something that they've heard before, either city code or the conditional use permit. Although I think that Brandon mentioned that a little bit during Mr. Carlisle's presentation. So unless Development Services is concerned about actual, the city actually prohibiting the development from taking place as planned in the concept plan, then I think the rest of the legal issues, while complicated, are really irrelevant to the council's decision. I did make the comment last time this came before you that there was one way in which they were relevant. And that was that if you were concerned that you would approve the rezone and then the complicated legal issues later led to the development not happening, but the property had already been rezoned and that led to a later future development that met the conditions of the zone that you didn't like, that might not be an outcome that you would prefer. But when I addressed that, I also indicated that if you had a development agreement that said nothing else could be built in the event of the rezone than what you've reviewed, then that one potential danger was already addressed in that way.
Okay, that provision is not presently in the agreement, right?
It is. I didn't show it to you because it's actually a standard part of all of our templates. It's not in subsection. It's not in paragraph 4 about additional obligations. It's in paragraph 3 that says the project shall be developed by the developer in accordance with the concept plan, the vesting ordinance, and disagreement, and that variations from the concept plan have to come back to the council.
Okay, thank you. You've answered my questions.
Are there other comments from counselors? Particularly like to hear first comments from those who haven't spoken yet, which I think is the 3 Daves at this point. Mr. Shipley, Mr. Harding, do either of you have a comment?
Sure, I'll go. I'm looking at this as a request for a rezone. There are some concerns that have been raised, similar to what Mr. Jones just talked about. I feel like this development agreement addresses my concerns about that. I understand that there's still some legal questions up in the air, and they'll be resolved through the proper processes. But in the meantime, we've been asked to do this, to weigh in or to decide on this rezone request, and so it seems to be pretty straightforward, at least what our task is tonight. And I do feel like this is the proper zone for this property. I like the proposal, so I don't see much reason to not grant this request.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. You have a comment, Mr. Shipley?
Yeah, I don't know that it's unique to what I mentioned 2 weeks ago, which is that I'm persuaded that we should move forward with this. I think the legal issues will, we've already talked about it. They will have to resolve themselves independent of our decision one way or another. As far as, the Southwest area plan, the general use map, the neighborhood being supportive, I feel comfortable with all those things. I feel comfortable with the development agreement set forth by the developer. I do think, and I think I can't speak for the rest of council. For myself, I think it warrants, Councilor Ellsworth's concerns warrant, us looking at the land use map and warrant, a second look at the Southeast area plan. But in the context of this particular project, I'm persuaded that we can move forward with this, with the Planning Commission support, neighborhood support, and being consistent with the two land use maps that I've already mentioned. So I would be voting for this if we put it to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. I think as far as my first comment, I think you and several others have pretty much summarized my feelings about it. I'm in support of it as well, and I think it'll be good for the area, and noted that it fits with the plans as have been mentioned, and has pretty decent support from those that live in the area. The other thing I would note that I think is maybe a little unusual is, considering the size of the project, I think the developer has really made a considerable effort and offered considerable expense to address the safety concerns that have been mentioned. And so I just want to say that I appreciate that. So I'm in support as well. So we'll open it up to any additional comments, second comments from councilors. Councilor Hanley.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments that have been made in reference to my earlier comment. I still, it's just a preference that, having UDOT take a close look at it and getting the legal issues sorted out would be my preference. But obviously, I know I'm not in a majority, and I don't see any. I agree that it may be the case that the legal issues sort themselves out, but if there were eyes on the traffic and flow issues that were coming from other parties, I think that would be preferable for me. But I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Councilor Holman.
Yeah, I guess just real quick from the staff, a lot of talk about UDOT. How would UDOT typically approach a development like this?
So I called UDOT today, and they did indicate that they have talked with the applicants, I recall. I think the issue with UDOT is they just don't have enough detail to really go off of it at this point to really give us much feedback. They were really tight-lipped when I talked to them. They said they'd have a lot more to go off of if they had additional data. So I'm wondering if some of that data would probably be generated more at the development stage, at a project plan stage, rather than something at a rezone stage. But that's what I got from them, is that they just don't have a lot to go off of, and so they're just kind of staying out of it. So.
So just for clarification, if UDOT comes and says, no way to make this work, the development doesn't happen, right? Or if UDOT comes and says you have to have 2 entrances for each, portion of the development, I guess UDOT has a say, I guess. So ultimately, this development won't happen if UDOT says it can't work, right?
If their proposal includes access onto the state highway, they've got to get approval from UDOT, and that's how it is. So.
Right, and UDOT could also could add additional requirements upon the developer, right? They could require additional things, possibly.
They certainly could. They could. They told me they need an additional study. Out of that study, they may come up with some additional. I don't know. David Day might be able to speak to that a little bit better than myself, but that study may say that we need a light at 1640, or we need some more something to help with the traffic situation at 1724 South. But yeah, they just need more information to go off of before they can give us any feedback.
Okay. I guess I just kind of look at it like a catch-all there, that from a traffic standpoint, if UDOT were to come in and say, this doesn't work, you have to do this, and then litigation were to say, sorry, developer, you can't use the private drive that's in question. If the developer really wants to make the development happen, they have to find a way to do what UDOT requires. So I guess the UDOT concerns, I don't know, maybe I'm kind of being ignorant here, but I don't feel like the UDOT concerns are real concerns, because ultimately the developer is going to have to do what UDOT requests, right?
That's how I see it as well.
So, okay.
Looks like David Day has a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the conversation that was just occurring. Normally, in a situation like this, UDOT would be in favor of limiting access rather than adding new access. So on a major arterial road like that, the idea is to have as few conflict points as possible. And so the current driveway that's there and the intersection at 1640, I would see those as being about as far as they want to go with access. If there was a access that had already been granted in the past, they would normally recognize that, but they're very careful about opening up new accesses. Does that answer the question, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what's going to happen is hard to say with all of this, but I guess I was just looking at it from a standpoint of, if UDOT says no, it doesn't happen, right? Or if UDOT says you have to do this to make it more safe, that, the developer has to agree. We can't approve a development without UDOT's approval. So they'll have to comply. And so I'm just thinking that the concerns regarding UDOT, I don't know if they really should be factored in at this point, unless they're coming from UDOT, right? Unless UDOT's saying, no, this development's not going to work. And ultimately, we won't know that until some sort of traffic study's done. But then the administration, development services will have to say, no, you can't do it. We don't have approval from UDOT, right? So, I
would doubt that UDOT would prevent anything from happening there. Their function is more of granting accesses and watching over the street improvements on State Street. So, like similar to what happened to the charter school, when they went in, they were required to put in lane tapers that allowed for a deceleration, turn lanes and stuff like that in front of the school. The those are the kind of things that they would do, is adjust the improvements out on State Street to be comply with their safety requirements. But as far as saying, hey, you can't build that there, I've never seen them do that. And you would see similar treatment as what you've seen up and down South State to this point. So we've got, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5 developments going in right there now. There are a number of city streets that have been added into those developments, eliminated probably 5 or 6 private accesses in favor of one city street. So that's the trend that you'll see as things develop along State Street.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Do we have any additional comments from counselors? Seeing none, I will call for a vote on the implied motion.
Mr. Sewell?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I couldn't get my hand up quick enough. Before you call for a vote, I would just like to go one more time over what the current proffer from the developer is.
Yes, please.
Since that's what's going to drive the negotiations going forward. So I have, in fact, let me go ahead and put it back up on the screen. Let's see. Okay, can you see the development agreement on your screens?
Yes.
Okay, so in this version, I accepted some of the changes from the earlier draft. So I have the following issues that I believe are a proffer. One, that the developer and that the owner will either join as a party, or that we will negotiate a way to make the development agreement apply and be binding even without the current owner being a party. That the developer will complete the portion of Spring Creek Drive, including the full width as discussed in the meeting. That we will modify the provision about the fire access drive so that it indicates that absent tree sites agreement, the developer will provide fire access drive on their own adjacent property. The paragraph about the gate is as earlier presented. Based on the feedback of 2 counselors, I removed the paragraph about the crossing guard. So if that is integral to any council member's vote, that needs to be brought to our attention. The paragraphs about if the school ceases to operate is as previously discussed. The paragraph about the cross access agreement will need to be further negotiated to state that the owner is going to record an access easement to accomplish the same purpose. And then the final 2 paragraphs about working with UDOT and cities and services being needed in order for the plat to be recorded are as they were presented earlier in the meeting. So if we could have, I don't know if we could have a developer representative confirm that that is in fact the developer's proffer, and that the items I negotiated, that I indicated would need further clarification after the vote, that we're all in agreement on those. That would, I think, be important before the council votes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Can we remove that phrase in D about the crossing guard?
I took it out. Oh wait, is there?
And the requirement for a crossing guard will cease, so we can delete that last stanza.
Yes. Right. I missed that when I took out the earlier paragraph.
No
Okay.
problem.
Mr. Jones, you stated it accurately. We agree.
Okay. Okay, so with that, I think it is okay to move on with the implied motion unless any counselors have concerns that they want to share about how that what the current proffer is would affect their vote.
So, Mr. Jones, the current development agreement, is it structured so that it would become, or so that we would authorize the mayor to finish the negotiation on these last few details and then become effective when it's signed, or what's the?
Yes, I stopped my screen share. John, can you put the ordinance itself back up? So you'll see here in part 1 that the mayor is authorized to negotiate and execute the agreement based on the representations made in the meeting. And then, John, if you'll scroll up a little bit so we can see the part 2 and 3. Part 2 makes the effective date of the zone change contingent upon the execution of the development agreement. And down here in part D, let's see, part E also indicates that the development agreement needs to be executed in order for everything to be fully effective.
Okay. Are there any additional questions or discussion from counselors? I thought I saw a hand up a minute ago, but I'm not seeing it now. All right, if there are no further questions or discussion, I'll call for a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Harding?
Yes.
Councillor Handley?
No.
Councillor Hoban?
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore?
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth?
No.
Councillor Shipley?
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes. So thank you all. If there is no objection, we will now adjourn
Mr.
this
Sewell, point
meeting.
of order.
Yes.
Normally, you would quickly summarize the vote and the actual count and who voted for which.
Okay. So we have, the vote was 5-2 with councillors Sewell, Shipley, Fillmore, Hoban, and Harding in favor, and councillors Shipley and Handley opposed.
Ellsworth.
Sorry, Ellsworth and Handley opposed. Thank you. Anything else we need to do, Mr. Strachan?
No, I believe that was a productive meeting.
Thank you. All right, if there's no objection, and you'll need to turn on your mic and speak up if there is an objection, but seeing none, we will adjourn by unanimous consent.